In December of 2023, I woke up to Instagram direct messages from reporter Camilla Tominey. It's quite a way to wake up. She was ready to discuss this 2018 piece, specifically the research from the HJS, which is the basis for most of this article. Kind of. First, I was told the information was not from extremist David Vance, who took credit for this article on Twitter. And on that point, we agree. It always felt like Vance was attempting to take credit for a woman's mainstream work. But also, if a far-right ideologue is co-signing you, that might be something to perhaps reflect on. She went on to say that upon viewing the video by Imam Seymour Darwinist, she didn't feel like his sermon was compatible with, quote, Meghan's women's empowerment agenda, end quote. There's the article angle. So she reached out to the HJS to ask for any information that they had about the Al-Manar Mosque where the Imam worked. Welcome to part 3 of my series, My Roman Empire, Meghan Markle, the HJS, and the article that shouldn't have been published. This article, which is the basis of My Roman Empire, is trying to make two main arguments: that it correctly predicts its readers will gobble up, already accustomed to gluttonous meals of terrorism with side dishes of anti-immigration, pro-Brexit leanings, and the fact that there's just something not quite right about that Black American-born Duchess. First argument is that there are connections between the Al-Manar Mosque and terrorism, as suggested by the HJS, also implied to the women of Hub Community Kitchen, as this word salad title tells us. Second is that one of the imams of Al-Manar's comments on a YouTube channel reflect poorly on Meghan Markle. These are tenuous arguments that quickly unravel when you pull on any one thread. Let's pull some threads, shall we? First, let's start with the mosque and cultural center itself, and it cannot be overstated that Meghan Markle was volunteering with the Hub Community Kitchen that used the center's kitchen space twice a week. So while Dr. Alan Mendoza, executive director of the HJS, is quoted in this article as stating a simple Google search would have highlighted the concerns about the mosque and halted this poorly advised venture, the same reasoning could be applied to the article itself. Here is the Al-Manar Mosque and Cultural Center. Note the white arrow which points to this separate entrance to the kitchen. It is separate from the mosque entrance. That square represents roughly where the kitchen is, and it is on the ground/basement level. I spoke at length to Dr. Heidi, a woman born to an Irish Catholic mother and a Muslim father with a master's in Islamic studies and a PhD in psychology, who explained to me that the separate entrance to the kitchen is because it's a space for women and not men. It's hot in a kitchen. Women might want to remove their hijabs or head coverings. So the space needs to be safe and secure so that no man enters the area and sees a woman without a head covering who is not his wife. The imam would not have entered this kitchen. According to Al-Manar's website, the kitchen can be rented out for feeding people in or outside the community. So is everyone who rents the kitchen space tied to terrorism as well? Back to the article and the research by the HJS that suggests that there is a connection between extremism and the mosque. As we know from the DMs, this is not research that we can go read ourselves. But there is something to glean from the Southwest Londoner article from November 2018, which includes this quote from an HJS spokesperson: the investigation upon which the Telegraph article was partially based included 63 evidential sources, findings from 2 prior peer-reviewed reports, and hours of Imam Darwish's public comments, end quote. Note the word suggests. Do we know for sure? In what way does it suggest? Even the phrase once attended implies that they might not have been integrated, regular members of this community. Not to mention there are lots of local mosques in the area because Muslims have to pray 5 times a day. So is every mosque also related to this, or is it only when Meghan Markle is involved? It also brings in people who were killed in 2013, for example. Why include them at all? In the title, it says 19 terror suspects. It's worth noting that the article only lists 5, and that while 19 might seem like a big number, this is a mosque that, according to these 2018 figures, sees about 3,000 people attending the mosque a week. While HJS's Dr. Alan Mendoza stresses the point that this was not just a couple of individuals, he does leave out that some of these individuals once maybe attended years ago, and that it's out of thousands of people a week. 19 individuals, 5 that are listed, is not indicative of a training ground. The dog whistles are clear to those who seek to hear them. Moving on to a sampling of the imam's comments. Ms. Tominey writes that the comments by the imam are likely to, quote, shock the Duchess, who has described herself as a feminist and is committed to championing gender equality, end quote. The way this is laid out in the article is that near the beginning, Camilla sums up his comments, and near the end, she directly quotes the video. I have not been able to find this video. It's very likely that it was deleted. So all we have to go off of is Camilla quoting the video, and that is without full context, which is why we're only looking at a sampling of these comments. Also, this article is just an obvious attempt to profit off of what David Olusoga coined the outrage industrial complex. Quote, anger sells, that hysteria elicits clicks, which elicits engagement, which elicits money. And racialized anger is just another step down the same pathway, end quote. Multiple things can exist at the same time. Imam Samar Darwish could hold conservative beliefs, and his words could be taken out of context to fit the parameters of this article. And I want to be extremely clear, I am not saying Meghan Markle co-signs any of these statements. That's a moot point. What an imam says on a YouTube channel has no bearing on her feminist beliefs. In fact, one could say that supporting an effort of immigrant women building community and coming together after a tragedy would fall under her suggested, quote, women's empowerment agenda, end quote. As Dr. Heidi told me, there are different sects of Islam. Ina, a practicing Muslim from the US, said that, like all religions, Islam has a conservative, radical right wing. Sounds a bit like white Christian nationalism. For a first example, we're going to talk about women praying on their periods. Ms. Tomini writes that the Imam, quote, suggested women should not pray while on their periods, end quote. Further down in the article, she quotes him as saying, quote, bleeding, not praying, stop bleeding, just pray. I've seen some of our sisters holding Quran using glove, which is a good idea, end quote. This is an instance like any religion where we find a difference of opinion. What every Muslim woman I spoke to agreed on is that it's not an exclusion, it's a reprieve. As Shim, a practicing Muslim from the UK, told me, why would I want to pray 5 times a day while my body is cramping? It's physically demanding. Surely I deserve rest. So what is framed as antithetical to Meghan Markle's women's empowerment agenda is really just willful ignorance of an entire religion. Next, music and dancing. In her piece, she says that the Imam, quote, claimed girls who listen to music risk becoming strippers, end quote. Further down, she quotes him, he also said that listening to music and dancing is haram, sinful, except as reward for memorizing the Quran, adding, those who are uncovering up some parts of their body, and you will have no control in your daughter, end quote. Every Muslim woman I spoke to told me that summarizing the Imam's statements as girls who listen to music become strippers is patently incorrect. Shim told me that even the idea that something that is haram, sinful, like music and dancing, can be a reward for memorizing the Quran makes no sense. He went on to say that if music and dancing is considered haram, it would not be allowed for men or women. Dr. Heidi brought up that even in Saudi Arabia, which practices some of the most conservative Islam, has dancing at weddings. It typically occurs in separate gendered rooms, similar to some Orthodox Jewish weddings. The article ends with a quote from the chief executive of the Al-Manar Muslim Cultural Heritage Center, but let's be honest, at this point, the damage has been done. The Home Office report showed that hate crimes doubled in the UK from 2012-2013 to 2018-2019, with religious-based hate crimes nearly octupling from 2011-2012 to 2018-2019. And that's only what was reported to police. That is the world that the Telegraph decided to push this article out into the ether. And it doesn't just stop with the Telegraph. This becomes the basis of several other stories in UK outlets such as the Daily Mail and The Sun, who quote the Telegraph and Dr. Alan Mendoza in their pieces. This is a larger problem than one journalist and one paper. We can no longer allow the media to ignore the baked-in biases that they exploit and profit off of. They have real-world consequences for women like those in the Hub Community Kitchen, not to mention the growing threats to Meghan Markle. This article is an example of creating rather than reporting on a story. Narrative was decided upon, and then facts were cherry-picked from an anti-extremist think tank and a YouTube video to back up that framework. Yes, while comparisons of Meghan and Kate, how they eat avocados or touch their pregnant stomachs shows a double standard, this article put a target on these women's backs and an entire community. It was reckless, and I would argue not much has changed since 2018. But it goes back to what David said earlier. A mosque plus a Black American duchess plus immigrants plus Islamic terrorism equals a win for the outrage industrial complex. A massive loss for journalism and the public at large. This will not be the last time that Ms. Tomini uses the HJS for an article about Muslims, but the next time has very different results. Stay tuned, there's more to come.